All right. I think once is enough, right, Alex? Thumbs up. All right. I appreciate all of you coming and listening to this. Last week we were trying to find a leniency, because not that you and I take this necessarily so seriously. I mean, we know that anybody who's sick, you're going to do everything you can for whether it's Shabbat or not. We talked about Shabbat vanishing from our minds, and not being something that we would consider following when someone's ill. We always know that comes first. So we don't have to teach you that. But don't forget, back in the day, and even in today, like if you go to a neighborhood where somebody is really from, and they're sitting there and they're debating, can I do this on Shabbat? Can I drive a car? What if the person is not so sick? They're hypochondriacs. They make it up. They say they're ill. They say they're sick, but they always say they're sick. Oh, here's a case. Somebody always says something's about to happen, and then you take them to the hospital, and the doctors say, "Oh, you're fine. Go home."
Marshall,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just checking with Esther. She said the service is still going on,
What service?
davening. Yeah,
Service.
I don't know why.
So they'll come later after the service.
Okay.
What can I do?
Fine. No, I just wanted to let you know.
What do you want me to do? Say shame on all of you for not being at the service?
Okay, continue. It's interesting. Continue.
I'm assuming that you've already all davened. So anyway, here's the thing. You know what? You all went to the 7 o'clock minyan. So, here's the thing. If you missed a part of it, Esther can catch up for the first 10 minutes until they're over, I guess, on the recording. We never discussed that concept of someone who always says they're, even the word hypochondriac is not really fair, but for them, it's real. Like every Saturday, they're afraid that they can't drive. They feel anxiety, and all of a sudden they go, "Oh, I'm having a heart attack," God forbid. And they're not having a heart attack. My first cousin, he's a member of our shul. A few days ago, he said to his wife, "I'm having chest pains." And she took him right to the hospital, because he's my age. She figured, he was about to have a massive heart attack at 63. And they did an upper and a lower stent, and they fixed, and he's good now. Good. I mean, he's going to live, and he's going to have a long life. Im Yirtzeh Hashem. So somebody who says every Saturday they have chest pains or they have a problem, are you to believe that person? They said that last week. They said it the week before. So why would it be any different on this day, on this Shabbat? And the answer is, you have to treat it every single time as if this particular case is different, because you don't know. And who would want it? I mean, as Jews, we're guilty all the time anyway. So imagine feeling that guilt. Oh, this is the one time where you said it's not serious, so we're not going to take it serious. We're not going to take them. And then you find out that was the one time where they had the actual incident or event. We don't want that. So we were talking about Rav Shlomo Kluger, and he, without going through that whole tshuva again, he said that it's correct to violate Shabbat, so that person who may go blind. We're talking about the person that may have had an eye issue and they had to get surgery right away. That if they only have it in one eye, they were discussing, so what? It's not life and death. It's not life and death. It's just simply, you're not dying. You're just not going to have an eye. Well, I consider that seriously. Maybe some person out there, you're laughing, Ellie, but how some people are. They go, "Oh, that's not dying." So you know what? We don't treat it that way. And neither did Rav Shlomo Kluger up to that point. He didn't treat it. Welcome, Esther. We're glad you're here, and the service must have ended, so you made it. So
just ended now.
Okay, so Rav Shlomo Kluger didn't treat it like big deal. It's an eye. He said every single Shabbat in the future for that person that they will be able to see because you saved their eyes will be a bracha, will be a blessing. And then we found out that there's this idea out there, which is a wrong idea. A lot of people, many people think that there's a scale of illness. You know, you have a headache, you have a bigger headache, you have a even bigger headache, you have a migraine, you have a really bad migraine, you're having a, you know, like to leading up to whatever it is, from a minor to a major, whatever that's going to be. The scale's over here, a tiny bit of a headache, a giant headache over here. So from a halachic point, there is no scale. Anything that's a life-threatening illness is completely different, and it has a different context without nothing to do with the severity of pain. Why does it have nothing to do with the severity of pain? Well, we know why, because what I feel might be different than what Marvin feels, and what Noreen feels in terms of a really bad and devastating as a headache, for example, might be different than what Marion feels. Everybody has a threshold of pain. You know, we have people out there, they say, oh, it was nothing. Well, it was really something to somebody else. It was just maybe nothing to you. So that, you know, like the last few years we've been living through COVID. Nobody can compare one case to another. First of all, long COVID's terrible. Secondly, one person could get it really, really bad. Another person can get it where just they have minor symptoms. I had it. It was like having a really bad cold. The cold went away and that was the end of it. Somebody else has it and it's really, really bad. But the thing is they had a different strain or a different virus. It isn't, you can't compare even necessarily the idea of the strain. You hear that noise? They're digging outside in the wall and is it really bad? Maybe I'll move. That's annoying. They're fixing the building on the outside here. Let me see if I can move.
Sounds like my apartment all the
I
time.
know, they're doing this project here. Let me see if I can move here. Where can I go? I'm gonna take this chair here. See if I'm a little bit away from it. All right. So they have this whole idea that if there's no scale for pain, because what affects one person affects somebody else differently, then the bottom line is that so far is, in conclusion, is that Rav Kluger at the end of saying that even though there's no scale for pain, the problem becomes that what he said is this. He did a little bit of an about face here, because he just said anybody who, it wouldn't be correct, we want that person to have many Shabbatot, remember, for the eyes. Then he goes out and he says this, in his tshuva. So you know what a tshuva is? A teshuva is a written paper that is usually submitted into a work of a book that will answer a question before you ask the question. So in other words, if you have a question and you go to Igrot Moshe, which is Moshe Feinstein's Shelot Uchuvot, which means questions and answers, what do you do in this particular case? You may not have to write to him. Well, he's dead, but you're writing to him or whoever it is that you're going to write to. You don't have to write to your rabbi and ask the question because his book already tells you the answer to many, many of the questions that you might answer. So Shlomo Kruger wrote this in his Shuvot. He writes, my heart does not allow me to rely on this leniency which I have just presented. So here he presents a leniency, and then he says, but my heart inside doesn't allow me to tell you you can do this. He says, I feel I cannot go ahead and instruct people to follow it. However, if this person can go to a non-Jewish hospital and be treated, remember we're talking about the person had to go to the hospital and they'd have to eat treif and they'd have to do all these things, then the possibility is that that person could be treated by a physician and the possibility of saving their vision. Then he said, so limit the amount of food you're going to eat there, limit the amount of violation you'll have to do on Shabbat, only do what's necessary, etc., etc., etc. If you have to drink whatever it is, drink a little bit instead of a lot. I mean, drinking would not be a problem today, but think about it back then. You know, you couldn't drink water in a lot of places back in Talmudic times. You traveled from one place to another. It was either wine or beer. Not a bad life, I guess. But wine was safe, but it was treif if it was made by non-Jews, because the grapes were crushed by non-Jews. It was part of the Avodah Zarah in the Talmud. You weren't already allowed to drink that kind of wine. beer was allowed because beer was made from hops. It is not used for sanctification. Although, for Havdalah, you could use beer. If you don't have wine, you could take a glass of beer, fill it up. Alex, you're getting excited here. When you're making Havdalah, the only thing is when you're saying it, you don't say Bori Priyagofen to start. You're saying She'akol Niyeh Bidvaro, 100% for
I knew eventually you'd give us some information that we could actually use.
I know. See, that's right. You know what? That's a good point. Out of all of this, what can we actually use? So there you go. You could use orange juice, which wouldn't be as exciting, but try that once. You can do that. If you look, ideally, lechatchila, as they say, to start with, if you have grape juice or wine, use that. If you don't, you can absolutely use beer. You know that if you don't have wine at home and it's Shabbat, you can say Kiddush on the challahs. Okay, but what do you do? How do you do hamotzi if you just said Kiddush on the challahs? The actual instructions, according to Rabbi Henkin, that I just read the other day, I was reading this because I have no life, is that you actually can skip the hamotzi. You wash, because between washing and bracha for challah, you don't talk, right? You wash, you say kiddush, and you go right into eat the challah. So instead of drinking the wine, you eat the challah. But there's a hefsek, which means you can't talk. So you wash your hands, you say kiddush, and you take a piece of challah, and you've completed both mitzvot. Ava, there's a piece of interesting information. You probably didn't know that before, right? So I always learn something that's useful, right, Alex? Okay, so I hope that's not beer you just took a sip of, Alex. So we have a powerful idea that comes out of this so far. And what is the idea? It's the idea suggested by Rav Shlomo Kluger right now, where he says that according to which the threat of vision is not considered in the category of sickness, then if it's not a threat to life, no one thinks this person is going to die. However, it's still correct to put aside all Shabbat considerations and do whatever is necessary for the patient. Okay, that sounds good so far, and it sounds reasonable. And then he says, Rav Shlomo himself, after presenting this idea, is not confident himself that he is willing to put this leniency in place, but he's willing to join it together with other reasons for leniencies. So he doesn't want to be the person that says, that everybody goes and says, oh, I had a bad headache, so I drove my car to the hospital to get my headache checked out. Really? Which posek says you can do that? Rav Shlomo Kluger in his tshuva. No, he doesn't want to say that in writing. He's saying, I will accept the leniency of someone, but I'm not willing to write it out and say that you can do this. I'm not going to tell you, let you rely on somebody else's. Let Rabbi Alex Roth say it, and then we can all say, Rabbi Alex Roth said it, that's why I'm following it. They don't want to take the blame here. So there's another rabbi who, of course, comes up with a little bit of a different idea. I spoke about him during Kashrut a little bit. So his name is, first of all, he's known as the Shevet HaLevi. So if you go to any halacha shiurim, anywhere, you'll hear the word, as a modern pasuk, you'll hear Shevet HaLevi says, the Shevet HaLevi says. But they never tell you who the Shevet HaLevi is. He was Rav Vosner. Vosner, but spelt with a W. So you would look at it, you'd say Wosner, but they actually pronounced it with a V, right? Just like vodka or wodka, right? So anyway, originally from Poland, he survived the Shoah, and he ended up in Bnei Brak in Yerushalayim. So this is what he wrote. If the only danger is vision and not another category of sickness that is applying, then one should not violate the Shabbat to save vision. Okay, now, understand we're not following this. I'm just telling you what he said, okay? And don't get excited here, but this is what he wrote. He said, a loss of vision is no worse than one's loss of a limb, and one limb lost is not a threat to life, and therefore the leniency of Rav Shlomo Kluger is rejected. One of the great Hasidic poskim of modern times is unhappy to accept the position of Rav Shlomo Kluger, and he rejects it completely, entirely, 100%. He throws it out. Not only he rejects it, not only that, but he also says that the Yavya Yosef. So the Yavya Yosef is written by Rav Avadia Yosef. Avadia Yosef sat on the court in Israel. He was the chief rabbi for the Sephardic authorities of modern times. So he's unhappy to accept it, and he wrote this. So the Rav Avadia Yosef wrote this. He says, in any case where there is no real threat to life, but only blindness. I mean, I hear this and I can't, I don't even believe that I'm reading it, but this is what he said at that time. But only blindness. There's no reason to set aside Shabbos. They don't have to set it aside. Considerations, even if it will mean that the vision will be lost. Rav Avadia Yosef says the conclusion is it's only a threat of blindness. No violation of Shabbat is permitted. All right. Now, if Rav Avadia Yosef, the leader of the entire Sephardic authority, who many Ashkenazim follow as well, and chief rabbi of Israel, says that, then that would be taken very seriously by a lot of people. So you see how people get convoluted and they get cloudy in their thinking and they make the wrong decision. I'm saying that already now. They'll make the wrong decision because if they're following that opinion, we already know in this room here that would be the wrong decision. We know that. I don't think anybody here would say, I hope not, that better you should be blind than violate Shabbat. I would get in my car and I would drive to the hospital so fast that my wheels would burn rubber, I guess, or call a taxi or an ambulance, whatever it is you do, but just get there, right? So there's a big problem. Imagine a real case of this possibility of a person with a threat of blindness. You're with somebody right now, and you're a from person, and you don't want to violate Shabbat. And this person says, I'm seeing flashing, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, maybe it's a detached retina. And you say to them, nothing we can do, it's Shabbat. Which opinion should we actually embrace? So who do I always turn to whenever I'm looking for the opinion on medical ethics, who's the voice of reason and calmness, and I have to say, acceptance. Think about the rabbi when I brought up his opinion, by the way, which was thrown out by a lot of poskim. A lot of people said, I'm not following this person. Does anybody remember who comes up with this lineage? He's a from man. He's very, very, I'm not going to call him right-wing Orthodox, but if you're going to look at an Orthodox...
Feinstein.
Okay, so that's a very good answer, and he'd probably follow exactly the same opinion I'm going to give, Marion. That's probably the best answer, because he would follow this. So Rav Moshe Feinstein would 100% follow this person, and Moshe Feinstein himself turned to this person. The person is Rav Yehuda Eliezer Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. So let's go back to the case we talked about of the abortion, the person with the Tay-Sachs baby, and they didn't want to have another one and a threat to the person's life. Moshe Feinstein, that case came to him, Marion. That was exactly who that case came to. And he said, you know what I have to do? I have to consult. Imagine a great gadol like that. I love that. That's where the words come in. I always get chills when they say, in my humble opinion, because in his humble opinion, he knew that he should go and see the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg. And he turns to him. He doesn't turn to him, but we turn to him. And we look to him, we say, look, what do we do, Rav Waldenberg? So nowadays, the physicians tell him, this is what he's writing in his Sheila Tshuva, which I'd love to get a hold of. I don't even know if they're available. I would love to have a copy of that. Igrot Moshe is available. You can buy it. I don't have it. It's expensive. Maybe I'll get it one day. You know who has it? I don't know where he's been. Lawrence Schulman has a copy of the Igrot Moshe. I'll have to bug him and get it, borrow it from him. So this is what he says. He says, nowadays, physicians tell me that they are hard-pressed to think of a single example where the loss of a limb does not threaten the entire body. Okay, that one statement, now he writes a whole tshuva here, but just that statement alone. In other words, if I said to you, I got to take off your leg because of gangrene, you can take off the leg. and it often saves the person. But how many cases have we heard in our lifetime where they've done that and it didn't work? Many times, over and over and over. Happens all the time. A threat to a limb is really a threat to the whole body because of infection, because of sepsis, because of blood disease. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical person. I just know what my experience and your experience have taught you through your lifetime. So there's no such thing as having a kidney disease which only affects your kidney. If you have a kidney disease, it's going to affect your whole body, and it's going to affect your life. And as far as modern medicine goes and knows, anything which poses a threat to a single organ, any one of your organs, also poses a threat to the person's life. Lily and Tristan were just discussing the other day that now medical science is telling us, I always learn from them, you learn things, because they were saying that someone gets appendicitis. In the old days, we just said, so take it out. Who needs an appendix? It doesn't do anything. Now they're finding out that it does do things. It helps, whatever it is that it helps. I don't know, but it does something, right? Bernie, what does it do? Don't tell me it's my show. You always tell me it's my show.
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. Lily, what does it do?
It saves samples of bacteria culture.
It saves samples of the bacteria culture within your stomach lining and other parts of the body. So when you take antibiotics and they all die off, your body can naturally replenish them. All right, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, Bernie, you are, but this is what she said. I'm going to trust her for her opinion because I don't need that until I find out differently. But in the meantime, but it's nice to know that everything in our body is there for some reason. Does that make any sense to you, Bernie? Maybe. We'll find out.
Some things are vestigial,
Okay,
right?
right. Okay, but we would even treat a surgery for an appendicitis as being, especially a long time ago, as being serious because we don't know what could happen during the surgical procedure. So let's say even that, right? Anyway, nowadays, we know that if I say to you, I have to remove a limb or an organ, there's a seriousness to it. It isn't just, well, I can't say, you know what, we'll take out your heart, you'll live without a heart. It doesn't work that way. We need all of our organs as far as we know. And unless we have two kidneys, so if one is functioning really, really well, we could donate or lose a kidney. That happens often. And Baruch Hashem, people are willing to do that because otherwise somebody wouldn't live. But we don't have two livers and two hearts and two whatever it is. We don't even have two appendixes, right? So we have to think about everything as being important. But this is the fabric of nature, which is changing all the time. We're part of an evolution. And we're not allowed to, at the same time, violate the halacha, which is Shabbat in this particular case, because we were talking about what do we do in case of illnesses on Shabbat. But nowadays, most physicians know, I hope, that everything affects our whole body. But there's another issue, and we see that there's a hint in the Aruch HaShulchan. You know who the Aruch HaShulchan is? He's the opposite of the Shulchan Aruch. No, he's not. He's just a different opinion. I'm trying to think of his Epstein, Michal Epstein. So Rav Epstein wrote in the 20th century, when he added this note, he said, if threat to a single part of the body will have an impact on the whole body, then that is called a threat to the whole body. And if it's connected to any part of your body, then it's correct to violate Shabbat. Well, that's a huge leniency. For a rabbi to say that, all of a sudden, by the way, the Aruch HaShulchan is an outsider. I love his books because he thinks outside the box. He often was not taken seriously early on by the modern Achronim. because they looked at him and they said, he's making opinions that are based on his own opinion rather than he was a thinker. He was willing to go outside the box and say, no, I believe this. And he'd back it up with halacha, but not everybody followed him. It took many, many years for the modern poskim of today to use the Aruch HaShulchan as a reference. And now they do, and they say, he says this. Do they always follow it? No, but at least it's an opinion, and they say, this is what he says. They respect his opinion. So now it follows, therefore, that if blindness does endanger the patient, then there's a reason, a clear path of which this position follows, both by the Shevet Halevi and both by the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, to say that there's a simple fact that if someone has lost vision or there's a serious threat to his or her life, then it's correct to violate Shabbat to save the vision, and that's good enough according to the Tzitz Eliezer. Okay, that was a lot of information, because what we did is we did a turnaround where one rabbi says, like Shlomo Kluger, I'm not willing to stick my neck out on the line and say you can violate Shabbat. You do what you want to do. If you want to violate, go ahead and do it. If that's so important to you to save an eye, then you can go ahead and violate it, but do as little as possible. That's not good enough to me. And it wouldn't be good enough for you. Meaning, we should be going beyond that. I would never say to you, oh, eat as little as possible, drive as little as possible, maybe take a bicycle and don't drive, maybe don't drink this, don't eat. Who cares? I would say do whatever it is. I don't care if all there is to eat is, I'm going to say it, a shrimp sandwich, eat it. Have it. It's not the end of the world. Nothing's going to happen to you. Save your eyesight and get on with it, and then go ahead and next week don't violate Shabbat because you're healthy. Not everybody feels that way. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was serving at the same time as Rav Moshe Feinstein as a major posek in Yerushalayim. And he said that regarding this person, which now by this time in our life, he died maybe a decade ago, I think only. We already knew what that case was, because back then they just knew an eye problem, but they realized that through the history they were able to determine it was an actually detached retina. So he said through that particular case of a retinal detachment in one eye, if it isn't treated immediately and the time passes, then it's going to lead to blindness in the eye. And here we have a case of someone who has detachment, and the doctor says in order to save the eye, you have to move quickly, and the patient has to go to the hospital right away and have a small surgery to correct it. And if it's on Shabbos, and that would involve driving on Shabbos and operating itself and doing whatever it has to do, you do it. And he says, in this opinion, and he published it in a book, he was willing to do what other rabbis weren't willing to do. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was willing to publish it and say, and he called it the Shulchan Shlomo, that was put out after his death by his family, who organized his tshuvas in order. All of his tshuvas are written on the Shulchan Aruch. He said, when the book says, Amar Harav, the rabbi said, they are talking about Rav Shlomo. He is one of whose opinions are collected together in the Sefer. He said that even though it's Shabbos or Yom Tov or Yom HaKippur, he doesn't care what it is, you have to violate it. Violate Yom Kippur, you violate Shabbos, you violate whatever Yom Tov it is, and that's what you're doing. Even though there's no infection yet and nothing's really seriously happening, it doesn't matter, because that, if there was an infection, could spread out to the entire body and affect that vision, and we're not allowed to do that. And he goes on to say that the Gemara says that the nerve fibers of the eye are attached to the heart. Is that true? I don't think so. But that's what he says. And he says, I know this doesn't prove to be true. Oh, there you go. He says it in the next sentence. He says they're attached to the heart, but then he says in the next sentence, I know this doesn't prove to be true. But he says, but what we know about human anatomy back in those days, when the rabbis made this rule, believed that if there's any danger that could be considered, it's all considered life-threatening. Therefore, according to the Talmudic understanding of human anatomy and physiology, we have to treat the vision in one eye as if it puts the heart in danger. And if the heart is in danger, then the patient is in danger, and this is considered life-threatening. And according to medical theory of the Talmud, that's the way it is. So they didn't know as much about medicine in the Talmud. So when they're saying that the eye is connected to the heart, that's perhaps what they believed at that time. Things change. We've learned a lot of things in the last number of years that we didn't know before. But even though the physicians nowadays don't see things that way, connecting the nerve bundle from the eye to the heart, it's not something that we accept. We have to accept the words of Chazal, of our rabbis. So if you think about it for a moment, we already know that it's correct to violate Shabbat or Yom Kippur or whatever the case is going to be. We have an understanding going on now from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who is accepted by everyone. I don't care if you're in Bnei Brak, they accept Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. There's always going to be some chnyoknik out there that's going to say, I'm not violating, I'm not doing, I'm not having, I want no part of it. I can't make people believe or understand what's correct to do if they don't want to buy into it, if they don't want to believe it. But that is what Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is saying. And I think that holds a lot of weight. He's a weighty rabbi, not weighty in size, but weighty in opinion. So we have an underlying opinion which happens in everything that we learn, whether it's the idea of blindness or Chazal's opinion on halacha, whether it's a case of abortion, whether it's a case of kashrut, whatever the case is that we're talking about halacha, there's an important underlying idea which has to be understood. And that idea is called safek. What is a safek? Esther knows what it is. Safek, doubt. It's called a doubt. There has to be, if there's a doubt of any kind in halacha, then we have to look at it in more detail and we have to study it and come out with it. So we say, if there's a doubt, we can follow maybe a lenient opinion. But what if there's a double doubt? What if there's two doubts? What if there's a double safek? You know, it happens in kashrut all the time. It is a double doubt. Something is always packaged kosher, but today the mashgiach wasn't in the place, or something might have happened, or something looked out of place, or you saw a box that was shipped in and the box didn't have that symbol on it that was supposed to have had it, but it's always been okay. There might be a double safek there because everything else was in order and okay, but you're wondering, does something like that in a large factory in kashrut, does it become batal vashishim? Does it become part of everything else that we just nullify it because there's a majority is? In a double safek, a halachic doubt, it's a different topic. It's something that's probably worth a whole shiur on just that concept, just talking about only doubt. We'll look at it one time, but when you think about it, look, a halachic definition of safek is doubt. So let's say that a doubt, just saying, we're not sure, that doesn't necessarily hold square with modern physics. Modern physics is physics. It is what it is, I think. There's not really much room for doubt. And it's okay because when you think about it, it works in terms of classic physics. When you have classic physics, you know there's a boiling point, whatever the boiling point is. Moshe Feinstein said it was 104. What is the boiling point? 120? 110? If I ask you what the boiling point is.
100.
Okay, 100. So why did Moshe Feinstein say 104? Why did someone else say 120? Why did somebody else say 110? They don't know.
It depends on what the liquid is you're talking about.
Maybe that's physics too. I don't
It also
know.
depends on where you are in the world. If you're
Right.
high
Right.
or low.
Yeah, it depends on your height, like,
The altitude.
like the altitude, yeah.
All right. How about if I said to you, You don't have a thermometer to check. What's the boiling point?
When you see bubbles in the water.
That's right. Because you know what's going to happen if you put your hand into the water with the bubbles in the water. Your hand is going to come out very quickly. It's called Yad Soleted Bo. Your hand recoils. You remember I talked to you about in one of my shiurim in one of my classes, where one of the students was listening and the rabbi kept saying, because he has an Ashkenazi pronunciation, Yad Soledes Boy. And the student doesn't have an understanding of terminology. And he said, why is he talking about the salad boy? And I thought it was funny and sad at the same time. But anyway, the point is that Yad Soledet Bo, if that is the boiling point according to the Talmud, meaning the Talmud doesn't know about this kind of physics. They don't know 104 different altitudes, different liquids. They just know you put your hand in, ooh, it's hot. Oh, but remember what I said before? Your pain threshold is different than mine. I'll put my hand in for 2 seconds and it's boiling to me. Ruth will put her hand in for 1 second and it's boiling to her. Alex won't even get his hand into the pot, it'll be boiling. He'll see already it'll be hurt. Everybody has a different boiling point, a different threshold of pain. And with that thought of Yad Soledet Bo, the Talmud said, if it's hot enough to burn a baby's belly, and we all go, ooh, what kind of a thought is that? Well, because we know we wouldn't burn a baby's belly. We would never intentionally do that. What would you do? You would check the temperature on your wrist first before you feed the baby or give the baby the whatever it is. So you're going to check it on a sensitive part of your body. And if you're checking it on your wrist or a soft spot of your body without calluses, you know, that's too hot already. I'm going to let it cool down. You know, we take for a little kid, we blow on the soup, we put an ice cube in the chicken soup, we cool it down for them. We forget, when we're older, we forget about this, but this is what we have to do. We can't just give it to them boiling hot. Here's a hot soup with knedlach. We have to cool it down because Yad Soledes Bo is important in kashrut, but it's also important in our given how we perceive hotness, if there's such a word as that. So if we were to take our own eyes and look at ordinary things, or we were to take a thermometer or a microscope to look at those same things, they would be perceived very differently. What you see with your eyes and what you see with a microscope is a different picture. So the Torah says, for example, we can't eat insects in kashrut. We're not allowed to eat insects, right? So that's why, you know, I mean, you and I eat, I don't know, maybe not you, but I do. I eat asparagus and I eat Brussels sprouts and I eat broccoli and I eat raspberries and strawberries and blackberries. I wash them thoroughly. I look at them, not necessarily under a blue light, but I eat them. I'm willing to bet that Ruth's daughter in Israel is not eating blackberries. They won't touch them because there's larvae, there's bugs, there's things that can be seen, and they don't want to take a chance in eating a whole insect. If you took those berries, by the way, according to halacha, and you put them in a blender, and you blended them all up, and you chopped them all up, now it's not bugs, it's bug parts. And if it's bug parts, I'm laughing, but it's true. If it's bug parts, it becomes bato vashishim. Did you know that? So now it's part one, not 1/60th. You can say, I'm adding water to it to make it a juice 60 times, or apple juice to it 60 times, and I'm going to crush the berries to give a flavor to the apple juice. You can even do that because you're crushing them up, but you can't take the whole berry and eat it. In fact, with asparagus, they cut the best part, they cut the top off and they eat the stem because you can't eat no, Ruth? You don't know.
I don't know, but about asparagus, but I just remember my father, Oliver Shalom, when he went to visit his aunt, and they only gave him the top parts of the asparagus, and he complained to his mother that they didn't give him the whole asparagus because they thought the top part's the best, right?
Well,
And
it is. The
I
top
know,
is the
but-
best part. The stem is good about halfway down. They say where you can naturally bend it, where it breaks is the part you're supposed to throw away, right? So what happens is it gets woody tasting and stringy, but you know, they're in fancy restaurants. They just serve you the asparagus tips, just the tips without the stem at all. Today, with the price of vegetables, we want to eat as much of it as we possibly can because you have to, I can't even believe the prices of a vegetable today. It's insane. But anyway, look, what we're concerned about here, when we talk about the bugs, is when I look at a blackberry, if I see a bug, I would wash it out, or I would not eat that particular one blackberry, whatever it is. But I'm looking at my blackberries and I don't see bugs with my human eye. Am I intended to look at every single blackberry with a microscope, put it under a microscope, inspect it? Brenda, you do? You look at everyone with a microscope?
Well, no, but I had, Norm and I, Oliver Schultz, had an experience many years ago in Israel. We volunteered for the kosher soup kitchen in
Right.
the poorest area of Jerusalem, and I can't remember the name of the area. But I remember when we were on KP duty, so we were preparing all the meals for the Holocaust survivors that would come for lunch every Friday. And I can remember, I can see it in front of me, all of the rabbis who would come in to inspect it, but they had these screens and they had these lights, and absolutely every particle of anything, it doesn't matter what item was going in, they were screening, and they filled up bags of stuff that they felt was contaminated by bugs that couldn't be used.
Correct. So my Rav right now in yeshiva just taught us last week. By the way, I had my oral exam and I passed, just so you can give me a muzzle tov.
Muzzle tough.
But that doesn't mean anything because I have
So
6.
when do we call you Rob Loomer?
Who knows? I'm a ways away from that. You can call me. I'm a quarter of a rabbi.
Good luck. All the best, Marshall. That's
matter.
great.
The point is this. You know, you learn something every day. And when this Rav was talking about that, he was saying, you know, when you go into a kosher restaurant, often the kitchens are downstairs in the basement because they're very small. The New York restaurants, some of them, they don't have room for big kitchens because they want to put as many tables as they can in there. And the kitchens are in the worst part of this facility. They have the worst lighting. They give them a blue light. They say, here, go inspect lettuce all day. It's a very hard job to do that because they're in the basement, they're in the dark, you can't see anything, they're working with a light, they're trying, it's not a pleasant job. I think the concept here is that according to my teacher that taught me this course, which I'm sharing with you, about this issue of when is it correct to violate Shabbat. We know the answer. We already know the answer. What we're doing here is we're looking at how did they deduce to these based on Torah and Talmud and the Rishonim who said absolutely you can't. How do we grapple with that in modern day history with the modern sources to say of course we can, and we do, and they tell us we can. When we look at those leniencies, I have a paper here. It's what I call a sidebar. And I copied all of Rabbi Fink's sidebars because he's a brilliant posek himself. So when he was talking, I was writing as fast as I could. I was typing as fast as I could. I can type faster than I can write. And I wrote down this sidebar. I'll share this with you. Here's what he said. So these are the words of, he's very modest, by the way. So I'm using the word he's a genius. He would say he's not a genius, but he is. He said that the Torah was not given to angels. The Torah was given to humans. And in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore everything in the Torah depends upon what ordinary senses can perceive since the days of Moshe until the time of today. The idea which must be understood is that safek, doubt, does not exist in reality. In reality, in fact, there is no such thing as doubt. A piece of meat is either kosher or it's not. And the facts are one way or the other. Safek, doubt, only exists in the mind of the observer. If there is no observer, there is no doubt. I love that. See how he talked? And by the way, he's just sitting there and talking off the cuff like that. He wasn't reading notes like I'm reading his notes to you right now on what he said about this. This is the way he spoke. Brilliant. And he said that if the observer doesn't know if it's kosher and there's doubt and you don't see it, everybody knows, he said, that in a case of safek, doubt, there is room for leniency regarding the rabbinic prohibitions. And everyone knows that in cases of doubt, we have to be strict in cases of Torah prohibitions. But as far as threat to human life is concerned, the truth is that none of us today have the gift of prophecy or can predict what will happen in the future. None of us can predict whether a patient is going to live or whether a patient is going to die. We have a pretty good guess, but no one really knows whether the patient is going to live or die given a specific medical condition. However, doubt that maybe this patient is going to die, this is a thought that maybe would reside in the mind of the observer. Now, the observer that we are talking about could be any adult Jewish person above bar or bat mitzvah, and if anyone thinks that this person might die from this condition, then this is considered a suffix. Why did I say above bar and bat mitzvah? We'll get to that. You're probably wondering about that. So as a doubt, that is a sakana nefashot, a threat to life and enough to drive to the hospital or even take an ambulance on Shabbat. Now, once the qualified physicians examine the patient, he or she might be able to come up to the conclusion right away that this is not a threat to life. You're on your way, and all of a sudden you're halfway there, and the person says, you know, I'm not feeling so bad all of a sudden. He or she might be able to come to the conclusion right away that this is not a threat of life. Now, think about this for a minute. The signs of a heart attack, chest pains, that could be confused with, acid reflux. You could have a chest pain. You could have, some condition that's causing you to have a chest pain. Symptoms can sometimes be confused with other symptoms that could be serious or non-serious. And then he continues here and he says, therefore, a proper diagnosis is the only way to determine what really is considered life-threatening. And as soon as the suffix, as soon as that doubt evaporates based on the examination, and then all of the rules violating Shabbat no longer apply. Oh, so I'm driving you to the hospital because you got a chest pain. We're there. I'm with you in a wheelchair. I'm slowly getting you in, and you go, you know what? I'm not feeling as bad as I was before. I had a Greps. I burped and now I feel much better. Oh, really? Okay. Well, you did the right thing because you didn't know there was suffix, according to Rav Fink. There was doubt, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So we're doing the right thing. Now, the doctor examines you and they go, it's nothing. It was gas and bloating. You're fine. Go home. Well, those rules of violating Shabbat, they disappeared. How are you going to get home? You can't now drive home. Now you're stuck at the hospital for the day. Okay, so that's a different scenario. I can't tell you now, and neither can the poskim. Now, since it's okay, you'll drive back home. You can't drive back home. You have to walk back home. Now, I suppose in a makam tzorach, they always use that word, a makam tzorach, a time of need, a time of desperation. You have other medical conditions. You have a condition, you got a bad hip, you got a bad leg. If you were to walk home, it could cause a real threat to illness. It's 99 degrees outside and you don't have any water and it's hot and you got to get home. You don't want to violate even further to spend money on Shabbat. Bernie says it's very unlikely that would be seen that quickly as in an emergency. That's true too. That's true too. You can be okay. So maybe you're there and you get seen after Shabbat, and by the time it's done, now you can drive home. Of course, Shabbat is ended. But let's say in a case where they look at you for 4 minutes and they go home. Well, now you're stuck. Okay, so either you better find what to do, read a magazine for 3 hours till Shabbat finishes and go home. Imagine the summertime, it's a very long day. Shabbat ends at 9:45 p.m. You know what I mean? And you went to the hospital at 1 o'clock p.m. and you drove to Sunnybrook and you live in Bathurst Manor. It's a long drive from Bayview, a long walk from Bayview. I've done it, many years ago. You can do it. It's possible. But just so you should know, the poskim are not telling you that now you can get in your car and drive back home. They're not giving you permission to do that. They're giving you permission to get there. All right. He says a proper diagnosis will take away the suffix. It evaporates, it takes away the doubt based on the examination. And Chazal, meaning our rabbis, maybe the rabbis of the Talmud, were correct when they told us that something may be life-threatening, and therefore it is sufficient to create a doubt in our mind, and it's correct to violate Shabbat on the basis of a medical condition, which the Talmud describes as life-threatening, because we already said anything, even a finger, anything that's hurting could be construed as affecting the whole body, because the early Rishonim said no. Oh, your finger hurts, cut off the finger. Not on Shabbat, but maybe your eye hurts, lose an eye. Oh, your toe hurts, well, you don't need the feet, cut off a foot. No, those are the ideas changed. John says if you drive to shul on Shabbat, then you can drive home. But no, but the rabbis aren't saying you can drive to shul on Shabbat. Some of the modern conservative rabbis say if you're only going for the purpose of going there on Shabbat, then you can drive to shul. That's a whole different thing. Halachically, listen to this. I feel guilty every week. I walk to shul and I'm violating it. Not even driving. How is that? Who knows?
You're walking too far.
No. You can walk far as long as you walk quickly to shul. You're not supposed to run home from shul, which I do because I want to get lunch. But you're supposed to walk slowly, leave shul slowly.
Because you're walking past another shul.
100% correct. You win a chocolate bar for that. I don't know if you eat chocolate bars, but I'm going to get you one for that. You'll tell me what flavor, and I'm going to bring it to you. That's the answer. You're not allowed to walk past a shul to go to another one. You're bypassing a shul. You can't walk. Look, we have shuls that we belong to. So here's what you're allowed. Here's the leniency for that. You're not walking past a shul intentionally. Sometimes I walk past Or Chaim. I stick my head in, I say hello to everybody, and then I walk to shul and I go. So you're not being unfriendly or saying that shul is not good enough for me. What you're doing is saying there's an expectation that I come to my own shul because they're expecting me. We're expecting Marvin and Adele to be in their makom kavua, meaning if you're in your place every week, those are your seats, then you should be in your seats on Shabbat. You're allowed to do that. So that you're allowed to say, I have a makom that I go to, a place that I go to that I sit in every week. That's my spot. And I want to be in my makom. And it's important. That's not only important for you, but there's a midrash that says that God asks, why aren't you in your makom? Where are you? We're supposed to look around and see that if you're not there, I'm supposed to phone you after Shabbat and say, why weren't you there? Are you okay? Are you healthy? Did something happen? Are you not well? This is where we have to get better as a community, by the way, every one of us, including me, that when someone's missing, we need to phone them and we need to say, where were you? Are you okay? And they go, yes, I'm fine. I'm lazy. I'm at home watching TV. Okay, just want to make sure you're okay. No, as a matter of fact, I've had COVID all week. Really, can I bring you chicken soup? We need to be able to notice when people aren't there. And that, as a committee, by the way, that's what makes a shul successful. That's what makes us better as shuls. Never mind all the other politics and all the other stuff. If we could have a committee, we have a chesed committee, we have a reach out committee, we have that, I don't care. I think we as a community, the people, we all need to be better at that, all of us. So I'm not preaching to you, I'm just saying that I think that would be the leniency for, they say God asks, why aren't you in your place? So therefore, that would be the leniency for going up from walking past another shul. But Noreen's opinion was actually it's written that way as in the Shulchan Aruch. It's that you're in the Mishnah Torah by Rambam himself. He said you're not supposed to walk past a place of prayer to go to another one. You're supposed to stop. That's the closest one. Go there. Anyway, Rabbi Fink can finish us off with this, and then I'll let you go, because there's tons here. He says it leaves us with a big problem. We went through this whole idea of suffix of doubt. And he says we aren't going to get into it today, and we did next week, so we'll do the same thing about doubt, about suffix. But he says eventually we'll come to it. And he left us hanging, so I'll probably leave you hanging. But here's what he said. He said, namely, some people are just compulsive, and some people always think that they're going to die. Everything is an emergency. And some people always think that their loved ones are going to die in its emergency. Whether the trivial medical condition is, and some people always have a suffix. They always have a doubt. Doesn't matter if it's trivial, there are warriors out there. We love each other. We want each other to be well. And anything happens, I'm not taking a chance. We're going right away. In their mind, any condition is life-threatening. Well, we can't dismiss that person's mind. We have to be kind and think that they have a right to feel that way. Whether we think they're a little mishiga or not, it doesn't matter. That's the suffix, that's the doubt. So we have to work out some kind of way of coming to the idea of distinguishing between those doubts which are halachically admissible. See, a halachically admissible doubt. Some doubts are admissible halachically, and some of them are not. Some of them we ignore, some we don't. So what do we have up to this point? According to the mainstream poskim, the mainstream rabbanim that we look to, a threat of vision, even a single eye, is equivalent in the status to a threat to life and justifies violating Shabbat. And we understand that the underlying idea of a suffix is a doubt, which the rabbis are working with. That is the end of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's thoughts. That is the end of Rabbi David Fink's thoughts on the matter and the idea. And we will next time come to a different idea that is brought forward by another man, a man who's famous for shiurim. Now, not shiurim like giving a shiur or a class, but he's famous on measurements. He is the one that classified this is considered a kazait, and this is considered a piece of what is a measurement is called a shiur. That's why we call him shiur, a measurement of time that we spend together, and that is the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish, he had some new ideas which we haven't brought up yet. Now, so why did I say before, and I have to finish with this, why did I say anybody who is above bar bat mitzvah, we have to rush to the hospital, but someone who's under bar bat mitzvah, we didn't bring up, because it's understood that every child is always considered halachically. I don't know when my grandchildren didn't have some bad cold that they came home for the daycare from the school with. It's like a circle. They're always sick with something. One is sick, the other one's sick. This one's sick, it gave it to this one. Everybody in the house is sick all the time. So what happens with children is that they have a health which is fragile. And according to back in the old days, that was thought to be that if the child, we didn't have the medications and things that we could do today. If a child's was considered to be fragile and more fragile than an adult, then every single child up to the age of bar or bat mitzvah had the halachic status of always being sick. It's an interesting concept. Even a bar bat mitzvah child who is completely healthy, completely fine, halachically, they have the status of being sick. They did that to build in a leniency built in. So you don't have to think about, is this a case that we drive? Is this not a case that we drive? It's a child, boom, you go. I have a pediatrician, he's semi-retired across the street from me, well known by the Frum community. His house is booming on Shabbat. Some people are walking to his house on Shabbat with their little children. Many of them are driving. They get in their vans, they all have vans. They drive over there, they go see the doctor, and they drive home. I don't see the vans left there. I don't see them sitting there and saying, it's Shabbat, I can't go home. They seem to find their way home. So I'm just mentioning that as a sidebar for interest's sake, because we often do what our community does, what our community accepts. Remember, we think about what does your community do? If your community rides a bicycle on Shabbat, like they do in some places, in some countries, then you can ride a bicycle on Shabbat. You're not really violating anything. We come up with all these rules, but we're going to look about the Chazon Ish and how he disagreed completely with the Shulchan Aruch. So imagine that. So everybody here is working with the Shulchan Aruch, and all of a sudden the Chazon Ish says, I completely disagree with the Shulchan Aruch. That is a true outsider. You've got to have a lot of credibility to stand up and say that, because if any of us said that, they'd say, who cares what you think? But when he says it, it means something. So that's what we'll continue with next time. It's 10 o'clock. I wish you a good day. I'll be flying home before the weather storm. I was supposed to come home Friday morning. There's a big storm coming, they say Thursday. And with my luck, It'll be nothing. It'll be beautiful. It'll be a bit of rain, and I'll be leaving 2 days early. But
Where are you?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale at my mother and father-in-law's apartment condo, and I was supposed to come home Friday morning, but they're saying Thursday night is starting a storm. So I found a cheap flight for $111 going home. I can't beat 100. So I said, you know what? I'm not taking a chance. I'm coming home. I don't want to. Quincy's at home with someone watching the dog, and the person has to go and be with their family because they have to celebrate their holidays. So I think it's better for me